Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, As-Salatu Wassalamu ala Rasulillah.
But to give you a background of myself and what I focus on, so you heard some of the introduction from Ustadh here, but I was actually born and raised in Houston, Texas. And I come from I would describe it as a secular Persian background. Both of my parents are from Iran. And that's where the name Haqiqatjou comes from. Haqiqat, or Haqiqat, means truth, coming from the root of haq. And then Ju in Farsi actually means seeker of. So the full meaning of the name is seeker of truth. And as a young person, I always tried to live up to that name. And so I went through public high school. I didn't go to Islamic school growing up. And I didn't have much of a sense of being Muslim. I definitely considered myself a Muslim, but I had no sense of practice. I had hardly ever been to a masjid. I didn't know how to read even Quran, like basic Quran. I knew how to pray, but that was the extent of it. And starting in high school, I came across more Muslims, and Alhamdulillah, I was blessed to find a few friends who, mashallah, were more devoted and had a strong sense of being Muslim, and this increased my interest in Islam, and it encouraged me to want to learn and study for myself. You know, what am I missing out on? How is it that, you know, I have similar background to these other high school students, but I'm not doing the same things that they're doing. Do they know something that I don't know, or is there something special that they have that I don't have? And so in high school, starting around sophomore year, I began to investigate things more, study more, read more. And this was before, you know, the proliferation of internet, so I had to really use, you know, books and library and things like that. But I increasingly found for myself, especially as I read the Quran, especially as I read more hadith and sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, that, okay, yeah, I am definitely missing out on a lot. And I need to take my religion more seriously. I need to recommit myself. I need to devote myself. And before this kind of awakening, I had no sense of, you know, well, you know, Islam, religion, yeah, it's something you do. It's something that, you know, my grandparents did. But what's the relevance? And when you're a high school student and you're in, especially the public school system, you have other priorities. There are other things that are important to you at that time in life. And religion is not even on the radar. It's something that is completely foreign. And that was my perspective, even coming from a culturally Muslim background. So that's the context in which I started to learn more, became more practicing, became more serious about praying. And then I went to college. I went to Harvard University and studied physics. And that's when really my learning went into a second gear, because alhamdulillah, there was an amazing chaplain at the university, Chaplain Sheikh Taha Abdul Basir. And I definitely recommend that you look him up. He has some lectures, and he was a big influence and catalyst in me wanting to know more and to really want to better myself and be a better Muslim. And also other friends as well, other graduate students, undergraduate students that were in that area in Boston and Cambridge that really had a positive influence on me. And as I began learning more about Islam, I became interested in some other questions that came to my mind. Because from the perspective that I had before in high school, I had a very typical understanding of how the world works and how we are supposed to understand and learn about the world. Meaning, if you want to really know the meaning of life, if you really want to know how the world works, you need to do science. You need to investigate empirically. You need to do experiments and figure out scientifically, okay, what is the universe, for example, made of? You know, atoms, electrons, quarks, what are the fundamental laws of physics? And so I thought that, okay, this is how to gain that deeper understanding. This is how to seek the truth, because the ultimate truth is found in science. So this is what I thought, and it's a very common perspective. And as I studied physics at Harvard, I began to realize that actually, no, a lot of the questions that I had were not being answered by physics. And what I also realized is that physicists themselves at Harvard, based on my conversations with them, some of them were Nobel Prize winners, some of them were definitely, top in the world. They weren't serious about asking deeper questions about their own field, about, okay, well, what really is a law of physics, for example? Because laws are human-made, right? You have human laws. The idea of a law is based in human society and governance. So if you're talking about a law of nature, isn't that anthropomorphizing, meaning applying illegitimately a human concept to the physical world? Is that a correct analogy to make? Questions like that, I mean, that's just a taste, but these deeper questions are not addressed by physics at all. This is something that maybe is addressed in philosophy, in the philosophy of science. And so this sparked my interest in studying philosophy. And so I did some basic classes in the philosophy of science and the philosophy of physics. But at the same time, in parallel, I was learning more about Islam and studying more seriously hadith sciences, fiqh, usul al-Quran, and the typical subjects as one begins as a student of knowledge. And some of the things that I was learning about Islam shocked me. Some of the things that I was learning surprised me. And some of the things made me feel very uncomfortable, because there were issues that made me ask questions, or with looking at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Certain events made me ask questions and have the beginnings of doubt. Alhamdulillah, I never went through a crisis of faith. A lot of Muslims, young Muslims, go through crises of faith for various reasons, and they have doubts and they have questions. And I definitely had questions, and very basic questions like, does Islam support human rights? Does Islam support women's rights? Does Islam support freedom of religion, freedom of speech, so on and so forth? All of these questions that now are very hot button and are discussed, maybe even on mainstream media, these were the kinds of things that I was questioning as I learned more about Islam on a deeper level. And so this encouraged me to study philosophy, because I thought to myself, well, if I'm having issues with the seerah, like this is the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, these are the things that he did, these are the things that the Sahaba did, these are the things that the Khulafa did, and that's a fact. They did these things. And if I can't accept those things, or those things bother me, then it's not a problem with them. It's a problem with me. It's a problem with my understanding. Okay? And alhamdulillah, that was a realization that I came to, and also others around me encouraged me to reach that conclusion. And this motivated me to say, okay, fine. If I'm going to say that there is something wrong with ideas that are very common, human rights discourse, liberal secularism, if there's something that is problematic or questionable about these philosophies, then I need to find out what those things are. Are they actually problematic or no? And so that's what encouraged me and motivated me to study philosophy and to get into these issues. And after studying for over 10 years now, I can confidently say, based on all that research, that yes, a lot of ideologies that we find that apparently conflict with Islam, those are real conflicts, but the problem lies with those modern ideologies. And this is something that I can tell you right now. I can explain it to you, and maybe we can get into it in some of the Q&A. But I'm not the only one who is saying this. If you go into the philosophical disciplines, if you go to somewhere like Harvard or Princeton or Cornell or Penn or Berkeley or wherever else, and you talk to academics, they understand and recognize that these deep problems exist with things like human rights discourse, with secularism, with feminism, with all these different ideologies, but it's not something that really reaches the masses. It's not something that's acknowledged publicly and broadly. You have to really delve into the literature, and you have to study it academically to be exposed to those contradictions and those conflicts. And so that was my experience, and that made me so much more confident and so much more grateful that, Alhamdulillah, Allah guided me and Allah showed me that Islam is the truth, is the haqq, and I need to mold myself in order to be in submission to that. So that was, in a nutshell, my journey, and I started thinking that, okay, I need to write about this, and I need to share this experience with the Muslim community at large. Because what I saw around me and what I continue to see around me is a lot of people who are confused. A lot of Muslims, well-meaning, well-intentioned Muslims that are striving, they're trying their best, but they have doubts, they have questions, they don't know how to solve some of the conundrums that are plaguing them. So I thought that based on my education and my experience, my life experience, I would start writing and sharing this experience and speaking about it.